When I first started coaching, I basically would open up a calendar, throw a bunch of workouts on it, and then hand it over to the athlete and expect them to succeed. And over time, what I figured out was there are 6 rules from which successful programs are born. When starting a training program, the first and most important part of it is to have a reason to for lack of a better term, to start with why. Starting with why means, why am I doing this? Like, what's the reason for me getting to the gym in the morning? What's the reason for me to not just go to the crag and try to perform every day? Why do I do the same workout over and over and over? And if you have a legitimate goal that means something to you, then you're going to be able to do a training plan effectively. If I'm doing a training plan because my friends are doing it, or because somebody has suggested it to me, or somebody tells me that I need to train, I'm probably not going to succeed on that. And so the first and most important thing is to make it one of your values and identities, to make yourself care about the training. The second part of this is that everything is too much. Typical athlete, when I first talk to them, will come to me with a laundry list that says, I need to work on all of these things because I'm bad at all of these things. And understanding that everything is too much is an important part of designing an effective training program. If I can come up with 1 or 2 specific goals that I want to develop in my training, then I'm probably going to succeed. If I go to the gym and try to get as tired as possible by trying to do all of the climbing workouts I can think of, I'm not going to go anywhere. One of the ways that we help people understand that is to make an analogy to reading books. If you're reading 30 books at one time, you're probably not going to be getting a lot of progress in any one of those books. If I'm reading a page here, a page there. But if I take one book and I'm committing to reading 30 pages of that a day, I'm going to get through that book pretty quick. And so we try to mitigate loss of endurance or loss of strength while we're doing a specific training program, but we really do try to put all of our eggs in that basket and remember that if I'm trying to train a whole bunch of different and conflicting values, I'm not going to see very much progress. The third part of this framework is to begin with the end in mind. And what that means is, from your very first session, you want to be thinking about what your end goal at the end of the entire training cycle is. Do I want to be stronger, more resilient, more injury-proof? Then I'm going to address that starting in the first session. Do I want to be burned out, injured, overtrained? I can also address that in the first session. And so if we're thinking of the way we're building our programs out, we don't do the hardest training we can possibly do the first week of training. We actually will start way too easy for the athlete and let that athlete progress and progress and progress so that they can always give a little bit more as the training phase progresses. When they get to the end of a training phase, they'll be doing the hardest training they can possibly do. But if we don't have that long term in mind, the athlete ends up going into the gym and training pretty hard, pretty similar every single session for an entire month or 2 months or 3 months, and then they have at best mediocre results. The fourth part of our training framework is we just tell people what goes up must come down. And what that means is no matter how good a job we see an athlete do in developing finger strength or upper body endurance or what have you, that value comes back down after a hard training phase. And so the training needs to address building you up to a level beyond what's needed for your performance environment, and then letting you come back to the level needed for the performance environment. And we do that with each and every one of your facets of fitness, understanding that if we can peak that thing, let it come back down, and then you can come back into the training the next cycle and not have returned all the way to your baseline values, we can go up again, and eventually your low points, the places where you're not feeling fit, are going to be higher than your highest performances were just a few seasons ago. The fifth part of this framework is that recovery is a real thing. When I was a young climber, basically getting home, eating some pizza, and going to sleep was all I needed to do to recover. But as we age and as our performance goes up and up and up, we need to recover more effectively. In fact, we don't call them rest days as often as we will call them recovery training days. And if we can get an athlete to take recovery seriously, they're going to have better performances more frequently. The overall goal of training is to create the greatest number of good performances in any given time period. And so if we can teach you to recover well, if we can teach you to take care of your body and use good strategies, you're going to get better training in and you're going to reach higher levels in your performance. Final part of the training framework is what we call Go One Better. Basically, all we're saying there is that when you go into a training session, there's going to be a way to advance. So many of us will go into the bouldering gym, boulder for 2 hours, do some various things that might or might not overload our body. We might do 1 or 2 harder problems, but did we actually progress? Did we try a little bit harder than we did the previous time? So when we're at the crag, how do we make sure we're advancing? Do we do an extra pitch or another burn on a hard route? When we're in the bouldering gym, we're tracking those things, making sure that we're adding a little bit more volume or a little bit more intensity. And in the weight room, the same thing happens. We add more weight, we do more reps, we add more sets. But we want to make sure that as we progress through a training cycle, that we're asking our body for more and more and more. If we can follow these 6 rules, we are able to build a framework for training that allows us to progress, avoid injury, and continue to build on our athleticism over several training seasons.